think we're live. Yes, we're live on Facebook. Okay. Wait a few more moments here. Is it such a nice day that some people are not around?
It's cold.
It's cold?
Cold, yes.
It got warmer. I got warmer. I wonder if we can have it at 7:30, a little bit later. I just got home too. I rushed to get home for you, but you know, it's meeting mothers and meeting kids and running around. It's
Right.
Sunday's family day usually.
Yeah. I've tried and checked with people, and it seems like this time is better as a general rule. I asked that a few weeks ago.
Right, and they said in the summer it might be better later. I remember.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that in the summer, but well, you know what? Perhaps that's what we'll do. We'll ask again. All righty. Welcome, Joelle.
Je ne vais pas y arriver encore. Oh, ça m'énerve. Pourquoi ça marche pas? Ça marche pas.
I don't think she heard us. Country art is with us. Does that mean like art who lives in the country, or that's like art that you do a country style art? Okay. So Celia, why don't you join us with a camera if that's possible?
I just want to finish my cigarette.
Okay.
And my coffee.
Okay, no problem.
I don't want to disturb you with my cigarette.
I won't get secondhand smoke.
Shavua Tov, Rabbi Fine.
Shavua Tov, Joel, how are you?
And everyone, I'm good, Baruch Hashem, and yourself?
Baruch Hashem, thank God.
Thanks God. Thanks God.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, let us begin. So, life sometimes can be a balancing act. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. You know, but what could be the hardest balancing act? Anybody?
A tight rope, 100 stories high.
Well, that's a beautiful metaphor. That's a beautiful visualization to help us. So what would that be in life? You know, what would be that 100-story tightrope that you are trying to balance between? What would that be to you? Anybody have a thought on that?
The making money and the spiritual aspect, the two worlds.
Yeah, a material world and a spiritual world. Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. Welcome, Tim. Right, a material world and a physical world. How do you balance the two things together? Excellent. Okay, that's a good difficult tightrope. Anything else?
What I want versus what you want.
Okay, excellent. Right.
What our godly soul wants and what our animal soul wants.
Wow. Okay, we can close the book and go home. You guys did such a great job. Very true. Another difficult tightrope is about identity. Who am I on a personal level, and who am I on a collective level? And the competing needs and the competing issues that would arise from an identity, again, personal, meaning father, mother, doctor, lawyer, Rabbi, car salesman, the hobbies that you identify with and other things that you identify with on a personal level. And then the collective identity, being a proud Jew, being if you're an American, proud Canadian, proud Israeli, whatever it might be, right? Or, proud New York Yankee fan, which I'm not. So, the tightrope that is between those two things, and how do we balance that appropriately? Now, from a Jewish perspective, the individual is of great importance. Our individual journey is a treasure. And the individualism, the diversity that there is very important. At the same time, our collective identity of something that's greater than ourselves. So this is the journey we're going to go into today. And of course, it's based on the Parsha. So in the Parsha, we have today the first anniversary of the Exodus from Egypt. And what is that first anniversary? It's the following year, on the 14th day of Nisan. The 14th day of Nisan comes and God gives us a commandment. So let us share the screen and share the commandment. Okay. In front of you, text 1a. God spoke to Moses, to Moshe, in the Sinai desert, in the second year of their exodus from the land of Egypt, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, saying, the children of Israel shall make a Passover sacrifice in its appointed time. On the afternoon of the 14th of this month, you shall take in its appointed time, in accordance with all of its statutes and all of its ordinances, you shall make it. Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, instructing them to make the Passover sacrifice. So they made the Passover sacrifice in the first month on the afternoon of the 14th day of the month of in the Sinai desert, according to all that God had commanded Moshe. So did the children of Israel do. Now, an interesting thing to note over here, that this first Passover in the desert, as opposed to the original Passover in Egypt, the sacrifice took place on Shabbos, which is, something of a big deal, because Shabbos, the law is, you're not supposed to slaughter an animal. There is an exception, though. Certain sacrifices you're allowed to offer in the Holy Temple or in the Mishkan on Shabbos. And Rashi explains concerning this particular sacrifice that it says, "B'moy adoi," that you shall make it in its appointed time, after Shabbos, even if it fall out on Shabbos, you slaughter the animal. Now, of course, there is a unique distinction over here, because if you're slaughtering it on Shabbos, the 14th, that night is Passover, and you need to make a Seder that night. So if you're in the Holy Temple and you slaughtered the animal, you'd have to wait until the Shabbos is over in order then to go back home, back to your respective homes, and to celebrate Passover, the Seder, with the family. If it was not on Shabbos, then you could, the slaughtering would take place, and then you would be able to immediately go home to make the Seder with your family. Now, the Seder then would be in the area of Jerusalem where the family came up for the holiday, but not on Temple Mount, because that's where the slaughter took place, and that's where the offering was to take place. So therefore, that's a distinction that would happen if it happened on Shabbos. Okay. Now, during the Second Temple time, this is a law that was given to us in something like 1400 years before the Common Era, right? Came to the Second Temple, and just a reminder that that everything until after the destruction of the Second Temple, except for the 5 books of Moses and the prophets and the Ketuvim, were only an oral tradition. They were handed down orally from generation to generation. So the Talmud tells us that during this second period, in the times of Hillel the elder, who he passed away in the year 8 of the Common Era. So this is something just sometime before that, that it was forgotten, this law, when the 14th of Nisan, right, Erev Pesach, falls out on Shabbos, like it did this year, by the way, right? Like it did this year. What do you do with the Paschal Lamb offering? Do you slaughter it or do you not slaughter it? Right? I just told you we did that based on what Rashi explained on the Parsha, right? But Rashi is a 12th century, 11th century sage, but this is now, we're talking about more than 1,000 years earlier, right? More than 1,000 years earlier, 2,000 years ago for us. And the tradition had been lost about this. It wasn't written down. It was only oral. And for whatever reason, one of the reasons is because the occurrence of Erev Pesach, the eve of Pesach should fall out on Shabbos, is a rare occurrence. And so God forgotten this law. And there was debate amongst the present rabbis. And there was a group of rabbis called the Bnei Beseira, that they said, no, you are not allowed to bring the offering on Shabbos. And there was a dramatic moment where Hillel the elder, Hillel Azaken as he's called, he resolved the matter. And, he was already a very impressive scholar. And as a result, they appointed him to become the Nasi, the head of the rabbinical court. The Nasi, he is the head of the Jewish people, as we've been learning in Pirkei Avos, right? That time there's Hillel and Shammai, the 2 heads, and he replaced the Bnei Beseira. So the story goes as follows from the Talmud. One year, the 14th of Nisan fell on Shabbos. They asked Hillel the elder, does the Passover sacrifice override the Shabbos? In other words, the question is, can you slaughter it and therefore make the offering on that day because it's Shabbos? He said, is there only one Passover in the year that overrides the Shabbos? There are, in fact, more than 300 Passovers in the year that override the Shabbos. Everyone in the temple gathered around him in protest. What are you saying? He said, the daily Tamid sacrifice, the daily communal offering, is a communal offering, and it overrides the Shabbos. Likewise, the Passover sacrifice is a communal offering, and it overrides the Shabbos. Moreover, I was taught by my teachers explicitly that the Passover sacrifice overrides the Shabbos. That very day, they appointed Hillel as a Nasi, and he taught the laws of the Passover sacrifice. Okay, so let's understand what's going on over here. That's a piece of Talmud. Let's understand this piece of Talmud. Clearly in the Torah, you're allowed to offer on Shabbos communal sacrifices called the Korban Tamid. Tamid means constant. It's once in the morning, once in the afternoon. That's where our prayers come from. Shachris, Mincha. As a result, they're the replacement, or the Korban Musaf. What's Musaf? The additional, right? And then what do we have Musaf? The Musaf prayer on Shabbos and holidays, right? It's an additional. Why is it additional? Because on those days, on those special days, it was an additional offering that was made. What kind of offering? Not a personal one, but a communal one. That is allowed to be slaughtered on Shabbos. Personal offerings, like if sin offering, something we spoke about last week's Parsha, right? About music and that the accompaniment of the Levites to help person to come to a place of tshuva, and that they would do confession over their sin offering. That, or a korban toda. My daughter-in-law just gave birth. So back in the day, you would have to bring a Thanksgiving offering to Hashem after giving birth. At some point, you would come to the Beis Hamikdash to thank Hashem for, birth and being healthy and having a child. So those personal offerings do not override Shabbos, right? Only if it's communal. So Paschal Lamb offering, that was the issue at hand. And that's where there was lack of clarity by the rabbis of the time until Hillel came. How do we look at it? Do we look at it as a communal offering, or do we look at it as a personal offering? So this is where the debate became, a significant debate, until finally Hillel resolved everything. And the reason is, you think, well, what's the issue over here? Well, because it's not so simple. Because there's different sides to the Paschal Lamb offering that would make it appear as personal. How's it personal? As opposed to communal. Well, communal, it's taken from communal funds that you give a half a shekel. Remember, everybody gives half a shekel. We've learned this idea previously. And that way everybody has an equal connection to the communal sacrifices throughout the year. But here, it wasn't from the communal funds that you took for this sacrifice. You had to take from your own funds. So that makes it personal, right? Private. See the Rambam. Rambam says, there's a positive commandment to offer the Paschal sacrifice on the 14th day of the month of Nisan after midday. This offering is brought only from lambs or goats, and male in the first year. Both men and women are obligated in this mitzvah. So who's obligated? It's not the communal. It's not a community obligation. Both men and women. So it's private in that respect. Yet on the other hand, you have to eat it as part of a group. And not only that, you can't even have any leftovers in the group. It's forbidden. Text number 4. In the book of Shmois, of Exodus, it says, speak to the entire community of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, let each one take a lamb for each parental home, a lamb for each household. But if the household is too small for the lamb, then he and his neighbor who is nearest to his house shall take one according to the number of people, each one according to one's ability to eat shall be counted for the lamb. So we see it had to become in a group, a household, or if the household was not enough to eat the lamb, then you had to make chaburas, as they're called, which is groups, larger groups. As a matter of fact, in times of the Holy Temple, there were 3 large assemblies. That within those 3 large assemblies, there were many little smaller groups, many smaller groups that would go into the temple and give the offering. As in text number 5, the Mishnah says, the Paschal lamb was slaughtered in 3 groups, as verse states, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slaughter it in the afternoon. The first group of people sacrificing the offering entered, and when the temple courtyard filled, they closed the doors of the temple courtyard after their sacrifices were finished. The first group exited and the second group entered. After their sacrifices were finished, the second group left and the third group entered. So what do we see from here? That there is an aspect of a community, because you're coming together as a community. When you brought your sin offering or Thanksgiving offering, and that was private, it was totally private. As we mentioned last week about the kohen that would ask you, you know, why are you bringing this, in order to arouse that person to do tshuva. But that was very private. It wasn't a public statement that was made, let alone was it done in, you know, in a communal fashion. But here, this has got very much a communal feel to it, right? So we see from here why there was a debate and there was some unsurety about this until finally Hillel came, right? Now you got to understand that, you know, just give some more historical context over here. We've learned this previously. Where did Hillel come from? Anybody remember? Babylon. He's originally a Babylonian. Remember, this is the Second Temple. Most of the Jews did not live in Israel at that time. They lived in Babylon. But the Mesorah, the Jewish teachings, and the rabbinic court, for sure the Sanhedrin and the, you know, the Talmudic academies at that time were very strong in Israel. So he came to Israel. He wanted to study there from the great teachers that were there at the time. So he immigrated. So it's, you know, it's not something that would be natural for him to become the Nasi, because he's an immigrant. He's, you know, Leah, as you know, a greener, right? A greener. Right, as all Holocaust survivors or those who came from Europe, what were they called when they came here? Greeners. And they, you know, they stuck out. They were different. And so Hillel was different. He wasn't, you know, part of the natural chevra, shall we say. And not only that, he came penniless. He earned a living as a wood chopper, and he would just earn enough to pay entry to the base midrash. Because back in the day, you had to pay to come and learn. Something that actually later on it was abolished, but because of him, actually, famous story. Well, he's a wood chopper. During the winter, he didn't have that much wood chopping to do, so he didn't have he didn't have a livelihood, and he wanted to study. He couldn't pay the entrance fee for the day. So you know what he did? He climbed up on the roof and he listened in from the roof. You know what happened that day? It snowed in Jerusalem and he got covered. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the day, they see an image of, you know, I guess it was some kind of a clear, translucent kind of roof. And they see an image of somebody because it's darkened. You know, the rest of the snow is light. And here it's darkened because of the water. They go up there and they see it's Hillel, a young man who is so eager, so devoted, that he was ready to take any kind of discomfort just so he could study. So they let him in, henceforward. And his brilliance shone. Not only that, as we know about him, he was exceptional in his humility and his patience, his kindness, and his great wisdom. By the way, incidentally, after he became the Nasi, appointed as the Nasi, because of his unique greatness, 14 generations after him were the leaders of the Jewish people. 14 generations until the year 425. He passed away the year 8. That's over 400 years after his passing, 14 generations, until Rabbi Yehuda Nesia, he passed away, and the Romans, who then governed in Eretz Yisrael, they didn't want any kind of successor because they wanted to crush Judaism, and they wanted to make sure they didn't have a successor of Hillel. So this is Hillel, and his succession to the sort of the throne of being Nasi comes through this story that deals with our Parsha. And of course, it must be something much more deeply engaged in this than just merely halachic ruling. Of course, it's a halachic ruling, but there's something much more profound in this ruling that yes, on Shabbos you can slaughter this, right? Because again, the point being over here, there's two ways you could look at this. Paschal lamb offering. You could look at it as a private offering because it comes from private funds. It's private obligation that the Torah gives, not a public communal obligation. But on the other hand, we see clearly that you have to come in groups, right? You don't eat this by yourself. You don't celebrate it on your own. Where other offerings, if it was private, and if you did have a portion, not necessarily you would have a portion, but if there was a portion to be had to the person that's bringing it, like a sin offering, you don't. But a Thanksgiving offering, yes, you do. You eat, it's yours privately because others can't partake in it. It's because it's your offering. It's your offering. So we see here something that, the mixture or the I don't know what's I'm using the right word over here, the sort of the tightrope that we're talking about, right, of private or communal offering in the Paschal lamb has components of both. Okay, so let's take this deeper and try to appreciate the important meaning behind all of this debate between the Bnei B'Seira, those sages in his time that were leaders of the Jewish community, and Hillel HaZaken. Okay. So
Why'd they call him Zaken? Was he old or just because he was so wise?
both. He passed away at the tender age of 120. Yeah. Tender age of 120. All right. Welcome, Denny. And to Vilma, I didn't say hello to earlier either. Okay. So let's understand the debate a little more deeply, and then we'll understand Hillel and what his teachings and his halachic ruling come to tell us. Just as a reminder that, halacha is the actions in how we need to conduct our life. Halacha means a path, the way we walk in life, the path in life that we need to walk. Walk means the actions that we need to take, right? It evolves, though, from a spiritual place. So when we understand it in spiritual terms, we can understand how it evolves into taking the path this way rather than taking the path that way. Or in our particular case over here, that the Korban Pesach, that the Paschal lamb offering, can be slaughtered and must be slaughtered on Shabbos, according to Hillel, as opposed to the Bnei B'Seira that said not that way, right? And what is the debate dependent on? How do we look at this offering? Is it a personal, private affair of the offering, or is it a communal? Because the halacha is communal. We can offer and slaughter it on Shabbos. Private offering, we're not allowed. Okay? So, the Bnei B'Seira took their lead or their guide from the original Passover. Where's the original Passover? In Egypt, right? Remember, in our Parsha this week, we're a year later, right? The second year going out of Egypt in the first month, God commands to bring the Paschal Lamb offering. But they are telling us that let's look at the original Passover. And that brings more clarity to the issue. So what do we have in the original, right? Moshe summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, draw forth. This is before going out of Egypt, right? Before the 10th plague. Draw forth and buy for yourself. Oh, buy for yourself. Underline those words, right? A sheep for your families and slaughter the Passover sacrifice. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop and immerse it in the blood that is in the basin, and you shall extend to the lintel and the two doorposts the blood that is in the basin, and you shall not go out any man from the entrance of the house until morning. So what do we got over here, folks? Very clearly, the original Pesach was not at all a national event, right? There was no communal gathering over here. On the contrary, don't go out of your home. Stay in your home.
But it was private because it had to be private because of the.
Okay, but that's what they're taking there. That's what they're saying. So therefore, the communal offering of the Paschal Lamb is private. That's exactly the point they're making. Exactly. Right? That is exactly what their opinion is. But Hillel says, you can't determine from that time. Why? How come? How come you can't determine from it? Why not? Because then we get a command this week, a year later, of what the Pesach offering is for generations. That was the command that had to be done in Egypt. But now this week comes a new command. So we can't take our guide from there. Our instructions have to be what it says later, that God says for generations, right? What is it? Even though this was a mitzvah then also for generations, as it says, but the details of it was not for generations. The offering is for generations. But in this week's Parsha, when it comes the following year, Pesach in the desert, in the Midbar, from here we will establish the details of the mitzvah. Is that clear? And therefore, the details of the mitzvah is that we need to do it in groups, and it's no longer a private event, and it's not a private sacrifice. So let's take this even a step deeper. One Passover is not disconnected from the other Passover. There's a connection between them, and this is what the understanding of Hillel is. In other words, where does our identity begin and start with as Jews? Passover. It's the first holiday, right? It's the first holiday. After that comes Shavuos. After that comes Sukkot. So it's the first holiday. It is the first thing in our personal and national and collective identity. So let's take this apart and understand, what does it mean, an identity? Remember before we spoke about the tightrope, right? As Ahova said on the 100th floor, boy, making it very challenge of a tightrope. What is the tightrope here that we're discussing? What's our identity, right? What molds and shapes it? What is priority in identity, and so on. So here, Hillel says there's a two-part process. There's a two-part process. The first thing is we need to develop our individual identity, much like the first Pesach. The first Pesach, you didn't leave your home. You stayed in your home, right? It was a private affair. To start the journey in life, we have to have some form of self-actualization. You can't ultimately bond with another. You don't get married and then self-actualize. You first have to find yourself. You have to be yourself. You have to be the authentic you. Then you can get married. right? Why? It's because if you can't bond with another if you're not the authentic you to begin with. You can't have a relationship with another if you're not the authentic and real you to start with. As the saying goes, I haven't been on a plane for a long time, but I hear that that's what they say. First, put on your own mask, and then put on the child's mask, right? So first, you need to take care of yourself in the sense of your journey, right? And we see that, a child is very self-directed because they need ultimately first to direct to themselves to find the true identity and self-actualize themselves. So they go to the yeshiva and they learn and they have to become scholarly and learned. That is the first step that a person needs to embark, right? We see that even on a collective level of nationhood, is that there isn't the collective whole of the Jewish people. There's 12 tribes. Each tribe has its own flag. Each tribe has its own unique path, its own unique mission that it needs to accomplish, so much so that there shouldn't even be intermingling between tribes, originally, until there was a time that there was, but, right? But that's what's important. Hillel argues you can't stop there. Where do you go after that? After that process? That's Pesach Mitzrayim. That's Passover of Egypt. That's how we started. But now we get a new command because we have to go to the next level, to the next part of the process. We need the collective whole now to incorporate into our lives. In other words, my identity needs to incorporate something greater than me. So first we develop the me, and then we come, and because we're more mature now, we're able to adopt, we're able to incorporate something that is greater than me. And that is the collective whole that I'm a part of. So for a Jew, that means, of course, being a Jew and part of the Jewish people. Now, that doesn't mean as a child, you don't have a notion of, you're part of the Jewish people. But you only really have a notion of it. It's not real for you. You're a kid, 10 years old, 15 years old. You're a kid, 20 years old, right? You're looking to feed yourself, nourish yourself. In good stuff. I'm not talking about, God forbid, in holy stuff, in Jewish stuff, in Torah, And that's that's appropriate. At the same time, are they learning about that there's a collective whole, that they're part of the Jewish people and there's a pride to have? Absolutely. It's not real. It's not real because they don't have the maturity yet to make it real. So even though you learn about it, but you're not living it. What are you living? You're living self-actualization. Pesach Mitzrayim, the first Pesach. Private. It's about you and your development. Hillel then says, you got to grow from there. You got to mature. And we need now to be able to connect, again, in this mature manner of realizing that there's something more. So just to put this in other terms, that how do you know that you're ready to get married? How do you know? How do you know that you're ready to get married? Just because you want to get married? Just because you like the guy, you like that girl? That doesn't mean you're ready, right? It might be something hormonal, but it doesn't mean you're ready. Huh? You meet your beshert. Well, that doesn't mean you're ready. What will be the sign for you that you're ready?
When you're ready to give and not care so much about what you get, but you want to just give, and you found someone to give to.
Okay, that's good, but I don't think that's. I think that happens more when you are in marriage. I don't think when someone's going out with a girl, he's looking, this is the girl I want to give to. No, this is the girl I want to get married to. I want to have her in my life, right? Two souls joining as one to create. Okay, but that's not a sign that you're ready. That's what's happening. Very true, Art. No argument on what you're saying, but that's not a. You know what the sign is? When you're bored with yourself, when you're not enamored with yourself anymore, right? When you're just, you had enough of yourself. Now there's room for someone else. As you've heard me tell the story before, the guy goes out with the girl, and he's an amazing guy. And truly, I don't say that tongue in cheek. He's an amazing guy, and extremely accomplished, not just in the material world, but in the spiritual world. Very accomplished individual. And for the first 2 hours of the date, he's telling this girl about all of his great accomplishments and all of the things that he has done, in the last year. And indeed, volunteering here, helping there, giving 22% of his money to charity. Like, hey, he says after 2 hours, that's enough about me talking about myself. Tell me, let's change the topic. Tell me what you think of me now. You know that this guy's not ready for marriage, right? When you're bored with yourself, when you don't need to talk and talk and talk, because you got so much to share, because after all, you really do have. But yeah, it's nice to hear. Hey, I just want to hear what you have to say. You're ready. Okay. What's the point over here? That's why it's maturity about the second stage that we're talking about. Right? It took a year for the Jews to get this second commandment, right? First commandment was in Egypt. It's a private affair. Second comes, it's public. Not only it's public. When was it celebrated? On Shabbos, to bring out the point that you are going to slaughter this Paschal lamb on Shabbos because it falls into the category of a communal offering. So this is what Hillel is saying, that we need to come there to this place in our lives. And with this, we studied this recently, this past week, as a matter of fact, in chapter 1 of Pirkei Avos was on Shabbos. We did the first chapter, and we studied this past week also about Hillel. What does Hillel say? Remember what Hillel says. He said 3 different things, but we'll just quote one right now. Hillel would say, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? And if I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? So this fits in perfectly with what we just said. First thing is, I've got to be for myself. I've got to grow and self-actualize with my personal identity. My personal identity, my personal connection to God, my relationship with God. I've got to enhance it as me as an individual. I've got to reach to greater perfection and growing, learning more Torah, davening more deeply, doing mitzvahs with greater passion. That's what I got to do, right? Because if I'm not for myself, who's going to be for me? But then when I reach a certain place, then if I am only for myself, then what am I? In other words, I need to know that there's something greater than me. And that is another, the community that represents the idea of the community. Now, the Rebbe says that in the very first the very first halachic ruling that he gave that made him the Nasi. So we can learn it this way. Interesting. So Hillel would say, on a homiletic manner. If I am only, sorry. If I am only for myself, I'm sorry. If I am not for myself, who am I? Who is for me means I must go out and buy my own sacrifice for my own family. I can't rely on anybody else because the command is I got to buy for myself, right? Nevertheless, if I am only for myself, who am I? You can't do the Pesach all by yourself. You got to do it in a group. You got to do it with the community in the temple. On a homiletic level, Hillel's statement can read also as following: if I am only for myself, who am I? If I'm not for the communal element that I ascribe to for the Paschal Lamb, which is why it's permitted on Shabbos, then what would I, meaning me, Hillel, be? That is, if it wasn't for this ruling, he would have never been chosen as a Nasi, as the leader of the Jewish people. So Hillel is telling us that the only way that he could be fit to be the Nasi is to demonstrate that despite the personal nature of the Paschal Lamb, it's ultimately a communal offering. And if not now, when? In other words, if not now on the 14th of Nisan, when are you going to make this Paschal Lamb offering? It's got to be today. So hence, even on Shabbos. I don't know if you got that interesting nuance. Again, let me repeat it. So we got the simple meaning of what it means. First, you got to self-actualize, and you've got to be something greater than you, the community, right? But on another level, to bring it into the teaching of the Paschal Lamb offering is that if I'm not for myself, in other words, I got to buy the Paschal Lamb myself. Remember, it doesn't come from communal funds. So you got to buy it yourself, right? It's because no one's going to buy it for me. I got to buy it for myself, right? However, and if I'm only for myself, in other words, it's only a personal offering, right? Then what am I? Because it's really a communal offering. It's a communal offering. So in the very teachings is even about this point of halacha that is expressed in his saying. That's something that Rabbi puts into his words, that is alluded. Again, that's not the simple meaning of what Hillel is saying.
Rabbi,
Yes. Yeah.
what's the difference between the communal and the personal offering? What makes it, what's so special about the communal? Why is it different from the personal?
Well, personal is only for you, communal is for the entire Jewish people.
But
Right?
what makes it in communal?
What makes it communal is that it is not bought by a person for their personal sin offering or thanksgiving offering. As we mentioned earlier, that if you did a sin and you need to bring an offering, so it's you personally that has to do it. It's got nothing to do with the community.
Okay.
Right? Or if someone like, my daughter-in-law just gave birth, so in the times of the Holy Temple, at some point, that she would have to come and bring a Thanksgiving offering.
Right.
Kovin Toda, right? That's personal. That's not, so that is not allowed to be brought on a sacrifice or slaughtered or sacrificed on Shabbos. But a communal offering is allowed, not just allowed, but has to be slaughtered and offered on Shabbos. That's the law. Right, that's the discussion here that we had. So that was the issue with the Paschal Lamb offering. Is it a personal offering or is it a communal offering that has elements of both? In the end, Hillel brought out that it is indeed a communal offering and therefore needs to be brought on the 14th of Nisan, even if it falls out on Shabbos, which was, in this week's Parsha, the day that it fell out in the second year when the Jews were in the desert.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Actually, let's read this over here. So this is from the Rebbe Sicha. If I am not for myself, who is for me, means that essentially the Passover sacrifice is a personal one. Every individual must bring his own offering, purchased with his own money, and it be a part of his own group. But on the other hand, if I'm only for myself, what am I? Meaning that the sacrifice must have the properties of communal sacrifice. And moreover, if it were only a personal offering, only for myself, it would override the Shabbos, and Hillel himself would never have become the Nasi. Thus, he says, what would I be? Now, we can ask, even if Passover sacrifice is a communal affair, a communal sacrifice only overrides the Shabbos if it is the one that cannot be brought any other day. Therefore, Hillel says, if not now, when? Meaning the Passover sacrifice can only be brought on the 14th of Nisan. So what we have over here is the balance, as we spoke about before, in identity. Identity ultimately needs to have both the personal identity of the individual and the collective whole that we are a part of, and that is an essential part, and the mature part that comes really only with time. Just as marriage comes only, with time, with the maturity. So likewise, when it comes to community, and again, not the the teachings, but the real sense that there's something greater than that you are a part of is comes with time.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely, go ahead.
We don't do carbonate now. It's prayers. So what is that going to do with the private and the communal in terms of prayers?
Good question. So, very good question. So our prayers today are both personal and collective. They're personal because it's about you standing before God and you talking to God. That's personal, that's private, that's not communal. On the other hand, if you look in the prayer book, Rifa'enu Hashem b'nei Rafeh, heal us, God, and we will be healed. It's in the plural. So when we are praying, even though it's a personal conversation with God, that you're talking to God, you're standing before God, nonetheless, you are invoking the entire community. You are not just asking, you're not asking merely for yourself, but you're asking for yourself amongst the Jewish people, because you're part of something that's greater than, yourself that's standing before God. So in the sense, we have both things going on there at the same time. And that's the idea of a minyan. A minyan means, a minyan of 10 is a reflection of the entire Jewish people. It's sort of the what's the word I'm looking for? Can't think of the right word. Well, if you take on a sunny bright day and there's a raindrop, in one little raindrop, you will have a reflection of the entire sun. Okay? It reflects the entire sun. So likewise, in one group of 10 reflects the entirety of the Jewish people. So the idea of a minyan is that you are indeed reflecting and speaking, so to speak, on behalf of the entire Jewish people. And at the same time, it's you talking personally to God. That's a real paradox. That's part of the tightrope that we're talking about. How do you have the what's the word, the tension between self-actualization, self-fulfillment, your personal connection to God, and yet you're part of something greater than yourself. So ultimately, because we're part of something greater than ourselves, takes that maturity to reach there, right? It's not the first thing, as Hillel explains. Is a greater sense of identity. I spoke about this on Shabbos. We have Fabring and Shabbos, and I said, what's the greatest compliment you can give a person? You're amazing. You're the best. No.
I love you just the way you are.
And that's not really such a good compliment. That's more a compliment about you. You're good for nothing, but I love you just the way you are. That's a compliment more about you, Leah.
What about thank you?
Okay. Good.
You matter.
You matter. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? So this is a thought of mine. I'm talking it out with you now. I did on Shabbos a bit. You're mine. You're my friend. You're my child. You're my fellow Jew. You're mine. Maybe might be the best compliment you could give. Why is that? First of all, there's a compliment on a person themselves that they are able to open themselves and to incorporate something greater than themselves. But you're saying to that person that, and by the way, this incorporates everything everybody said here in a way. You're mine the way you are, but you're mine. Not that I love you the way you are, but you're there's something possessive over here. In other words, your identity is greater in the fact that you're mine and I'm yours, right? Now, with a spousal thing, that's of course something, and with children, that is of course something. But to be able to do that with your fellow Jew, that you could feel, you're mine, and you can feel that sense of connection, and you tell that person, so that person now is connected to something greater than themselves, and you're connected to something greater than yourself.
Rabbi,
Go ahead, Denny.
I see that being more or less equivalent to what Leah said.
I'm sorry?
I'm seeing that being more or less equivalent to what Leah said. Because if I'm saying you are mine, that means regardless of who you are.
Yeah, 100%. I said absolutely. I just said that, incorporated what she said and everybody else, but in a different manner, that my identity and your identity expand when you can incorporate another. That's the point. In other words, you know, when your identity is, you know, me, myself, and I, right? And I am me. So then, you know, as the Kotzker Rebbe said, put in different terms, if I'm me and you are you, then you are not, I'm not me and you're not you. But if I am you and you are me, then I am me and you are you. Right? So if I can incorporate another into me, that's mine, that I feel mine in a possessive manner of identity, because that's what it means. Mine means there's an identity here of a connection, right? Mine doesn't mean here mine that I can, you know, this is mine and I can do whatever I want with it. That's not what we mean. Mine in the sense that there's an attachment, there's a bond, there's a connection here, right? Of something beyond me, more than me. Because if I am just me, right? So that again gets into what Hillel said, but I'm just putting it into different words now, right? And that sense of that you have that sense of a connection to.
You're talking about my us being the people of Israel, or my
brothers and sisters, my you know, mine means there's a bond, there's an identity, there's a shared identity. That's the point. There's a shared identity, right? So, you know, for a chassid, that the Rebbe would, you know, say about, he's my chassid, he's my shliach, is like, there's no greater compliment. There's no greater, like, oh my gosh. That made, I'm his? Wow. What greater thing could there be? Interesting in davening, I think I mentioned this before, in the Amida. So it starts off, Baruch Atah Hashem. Blessed are you, God. Okay, that's a reference to God. And what do we say? Elokeinu, our God. We're making God possessive. So if you recall, we learned this in Tanya, and I've pointed out in the Tanya classes. What's happening when you're saying that? And then we say Elokei of Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, and right, Isaac and Jacob. So the Alter Rebbe says, you know, he doesn't say in these words, but it sounds a little weird. How's God our God? We're His. He fills the entire world. He's the only reality. That's what we're learning now in Tanya. He's the only reality. We're a part of Him. We're like a ray of sun within the sun, as we learned today, right? So what do you mean I'm His? Like I'm the ray of sun in Him, and I'm calling Him mine? Identity. That's what it means. That I identify with God so much, He's mine. Possessive. He's my identity. So the God of Abraham. So we do that in a plural sense of us, right? Abraham identified with God, and Yitzchak and Yaakov identified so much that they were literally what we call a merkava, a vehicle, that their very limbs of their body was nothing else but a reflection of the divine will. Right? But before we say that about them, that truth, what are we saying? Elokeinu, me. He's my God, our God. Meaning, I identify with Him through Torah and mitzvahs, and that I engage in to such a manner that He's mine. It's very powerful. that we should be able to look at God that way. We can look at God that he's mine. Then that will give us a capability to look at others. Here, this is my friend. This is my fellow Jew. This is my student, my whatever. In a possessive sense, that part of my identity in my world. And that's my final word. Denis. Yeah.
Okay. So let me see if I have this correctly. Is it equivalent to saying that the life that I have is made better because you are in my life? Could it be said in those terms?
Good, but then it's, then it's about the things that you're doing. It's not about you. It's not about you. You do these things, you make me laugh, you make me smile, you make me happy, you make me feel good about me, right? So then it's not about you, right? Here's a little more, that there is that level, but that is a stepping stone to the point that here is much more profound and much more, so you're my friend because, you tell funny jokes and I like to laugh. So it's really the funny jokes that, I identify with, not with you.
But when you stop telling funny jokes, you may not be my friend anymore.
Exactly. So when you're mine, it's a deeper connection, right? It's a more soulful, profound connection. Ultimately, it may begin on an external level, but it becomes much more profound and deeper. That's so that's the so making room for another person. So it's easy to make room for somebody that they're filling me with something that I need, but to make room and to identify and to connect that person, even if they're not, it's my chassid. Why? 'Cause it's my chassid. That's a deeper, more profound, So that's a deeper communal connection, ultimately. But we have time to get there. We're going to work on that. I've got to run because my fellow Jew needs me for his 100-year-old grandmother who is, needs help, needs our prayers. All right, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A pleasure, as always.
Thank you.
A good tavach. Be well.
Thank you. Good week.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.